Welcome to Transforming Medical Communications, a podcast by MedComms experts. We share medical communications insights and advice from the best and brightest in the industry to find out what they're doing to push our industry forward. Here's your host, Wesley Portegies.
Welcome to the Transforming Medical Communications podcast. I'm your host, Wesley Portegies, and with me today is Caroline Ojaimi. Caroline is the head of Global Scientific Communications at Takeda, and she is known for a strategic approach to complex medical communications challenges, and her leadership and mentorship have made a significant impact in our field. Today we're going to discuss how she's working towards creating a more cross-functional collaboration in different medical affairs functions and about how scientific data communications can be better streamlined. Welcome to the show, Caroline.
Thank you, Wesley. I'm very excited to be here. Medical communication is definitely something I'm so fond of, and I love what we do in medical communication, so I'm very excited. Thank you for this opportunity.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you. So, Caroline, maybe we should start with a little bit of your background. We'd love to understand more about your career, but also, of course, where does your passion for medical communications actually come from?
I have over 25 years in medical communication, scientific communication, or even medical education training, both from academia and industry. And it's something I've been always very passionate about, especially from my academic years as a professor, as a teacher, as a mentor to students. And I think making sure we synthesize the complex science and disseminate the science to the right audience or even to our students from academia perspective, it really translated to my love for medical communications. Medical communication is very, very dynamic, and there's a lot of opportunities for change, for innovation, and the field is changing very, very fast. So that's how I'm passionate about. But my background, obviously, I'm a scientist by heart. I have a PhD in biochemistry and molecular biology from the University of Melbourne, Australia. And then I decided to relocate to the US, and I've been here since then. So that's really quite some time now. But I'm very excited about having the opportunity to talk about my vision or how medical communications field is evolving over the last few years and in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for the background. From my own experience and what I'm hearing from other people I'm talking with, the change in how HCPs consume content is also kind of an impact on how we need to organize ourselves as medical affairs teams and how the different functions like MedComms, publications, MedInfo, and field medical, how they work together. So maybe as an opening here, I wanted to ask you, how does the organization at Takeda differ from any of your previous roles?
Yeah, it's a really good question and a very timely question, Wesley. When I started with Takeda Oncology has a different structure than what we have right now. When I first started, I came in as the head of publications for oncology portfolio. So my team at the time were really supporting and driving the strategy for the publications and the technical implementation until last year, where the company went through a restructuring where two functions were combined, publication and MedCom function were combined to form the scientific communication team. And now I am leading that team, the team of professionals who are not just leading the strategy and the technical implementation for the publication, but also delivering on all of the SciComm deliverable, including MSL's tools, reactive decks, a company-sponsored symposium. And so expanding that role for medical communications to encompass also publications. So that's now what the structure is at Takeda. Obviously, it's a new structure for Takeda, and we've been working through it for the last year to make sure it's working. And however, it's not a new structure for me because I've had that experience previously in other companies. For example, when I was at Novartis, I was the SciComm lead for the lung portfolio. So that was a similar structure to what we have now for our individual SciComm leads. And I know other pharmaceutical company also have similar structure. Or if they don't, they really adapting the new structure because it seems to be a little bit more efficient delivering on our strategy and the deliverable. So It's not easy to adapt it. It takes time because you have to really understand the roles, the responsibility. You have to build the trust with your cross-functional team, especially if it's a new structure. They're used to seeing things done a different way, but how do you build that trust with them? And that's what we've been working on since that structure put in place sometime in June last year.
Oh, yeah, that's amazing. And I agree. It looks like a trend across organizations, and it all comes with their own challenges. And I was at the MAPS conference, the Medical Affairs Professional Society conference 2 weeks ago. And someone there was telling me, like, I don't want to break silos, I want to connect silos. And I really liked it. And we were talking actually about how to also integrate the MedInfo function within this constellation. And I was wondering if that's also part of your remit.
Definitely. I think it's all about that cross-functional connection. It's all about how we streamline and how we work efficiently to deliver on our strategy. Medical information, yes, is a part of the medical capabilities now, because now we have a different layer where we have medical capabilities where PsyCom fits under medical capabilities, but also MedCom and medical information as well, in addition to other functions such as congresses, KOL engagement strategy, and specific digital for the medical capability team. So this is what the structure is, and we all feel connected. We work together because we want to make sure we have the right publication to share, for example, with HCP if they requested. But what I think it fits really well with the PsyCom is the training team, because the training team, they have a similar timeline to when that data is being released, the data dissemination, the MSL slide deck. Once we roll out those, how do you translate that to training, to field medical? So I feel that training aspects of medical affair, which sometimes sits as a separate function, it really fits well with the PsyCom. And we work very well together. Like right now, even though they separate function, but we do collaborate very often. They sit on our table for discussions, for meetings. So that's how I foresee some changes will be how to bring in training as well into the PsyCom function.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, actually. And it's great that you bring that up here. I kind of believe in this like inside out approach, right? And if you have new data and new information to share, then first of all, the team that is responsible for disseminating it should be up to date, right? So it should be the first step. And I like this way of thinking. And I agree, like I've heard a lot of companies connecting these silos and integrating the different functions better, or at least applying an integrated communications approach. But I haven't really heard of training being included in that. That might be like the next step to evolve this thinking. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, if you think about it in every single angle, it fits really well because the timeline is driven by the timeline of data dissemination. And these different training capabilities, training to elevate capabilities stream, or training on the data and how the field are going to use that data to disseminate. So maybe something to think about in the future models.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would like to delve a little bit more in how we can actually get there. But before we do that, so let's imagine that you're meeting a colleague from another company for a coffee, and that colleague is in a similar position as you are. However, the company is completely still structured according to the traditional approach. And let's say that colleague is asking you a question like, well, Caroline, what would be the advantage of structuring it like you have structured it? Like, what would be maybe the 3 things that an organization could really win by doing that? What would you answer?
Yeah, I think efficiency. That's the first thing I think I would say. Efficiency and streamlining some of those deliverables. When you separate the publication from the MedCom function, typically all of our publication goes to the MedCom and they develop the reactive deck. And so it's an additional layer of complexity or steps that you have to transfer from one function to another, and then that timeline could extend. However, if you are a PsyCom and you're working on the data dissemination for a Congress, you're already involved as a PsyCom team with the data. You have the scientific knowledge. You have the actual presentation when you work with the authors. And that's an easy lift and a faster lift to make sure those available resources are very timely, they're speedy and timely available for the MSLs to use and interact. So that's just one example. that how we build that efficiency for delivering on these contents. But also, I think elevating our publication professionals or MedCom professionals and elevating their capability to that next level where they will be thinking strategically how you build your capability on having that integrated approach, integrated thinking, and also get a bigger dive into engaging with not just the authors, but how do you also engage with the field medical that they are supporting the KOLs and what's the need. So to me, it's also elevating the team capabilities as well, because we all know medical affair function in general, the roles are changing. And we're not just silo anymore. We are considered as a big strategic partner for the company. And we sit very, very closely with the GPT, the clinical, and we are a big function now, a strategic function. So we need to elevate that capability. And I think having that function combined provide that flexibility for the team to build on that.
Yeah, I like that. So I kind of heard three things here. One is efficiency, doing more with less, which never hurts. Then we have momentum, as in like speed, and making sure timelines are well aligned. And then the third one is like elevating our function overall. And by connecting the different functions, we will have a better understanding of the impact we're actually creating. Did I get that right?
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah, very nicely summarized.
Thank you. Okay, so now we have that clear. So hopefully everyone understands why they need to do this. Now, how did I do it? So from an organizational point of view, Caroline, like, let's say we stick with the narrative that I brought up before. We have this traditional organization and now they want to move towards this more evolved model. What are the different steps they would need to take?
Yeah, I mean, this is the most challenging, obviously. And sometimes, let's be transparent, Wesley, sometimes a decision comes from a higher level, from the leadership in the company. Maybe they come and make those changes and we have no choice. I mean, hopefully we have a choice. If they are going, hopefully it is a choice for them, but sometimes it might not be a choice because that's the decision made by the company leadership. But I think the most important, if that's to happen, is to really, really build that trust with the cross-functional team. And maybe also depending if it's a global role or if it's a US, for example, focus role. If it's a global role, you really need to build that trust with the regions and the locks to make sure they understand that we will continue to drive the business. We will continue to deliver on what we're doing, either from publication and MedCom to meet the business, because that doesn't stop. However, how can we work with them on the core deliverable, on really identifying what our core mission as a team, and also defining what are the core deliverable, what is going to be in the scope and out of scope, because what deliverable used to be done before, they might not be feasible to do because of limited resources. Now it's one person going to do all of it, but also maybe there's no need for it. How do we streamline those? But just really having that trust, that open communication with the cross-functional team, what are the core deliverables that's going to be in the scope for the team, and defining those deliverables, I think that's really the most critical aspects of making that model work, because obviously it takes time to change that mindset of a new structure of how things are done before. But just because they were done that way before, it doesn't mean they are the right way now in this current new environment and the changing field of medical communications or scientific communications. So the biggest thing, I think, is really setting up the expectation and building that trust with the cross-functional team and the LOXA regional level, as well as the global perspective. I think that's the two key messages I'll give, is really setting up those expectations of these core deliverables.
Yeah, I really like that. And you mentioned deliverables quite a few times here, and it made me think of something. The topic it made me think of is, where do we decide what we actually need to do based on the needs of the AGPs, right? And I think traditionally, we're very deliverable oriented. Like if you're in MedInfo, you make standard response letters. If you are in education, you create symposium decks or something like that. Now, if you bring these functions together and you connect them, how can companies ensure that there is a strategic and strong way of thinking around what is actually needed before even thinking about what kind of deliverable needs to be made, more the strategy setting of it.
Correct. Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to say, Wesley. It's all about how do you develop and how do you build the framework for that integrated scientific communication strategy. Now it's not just what is the publication strategy and objective, but what is the scientific communication integrated strategy that can ladder up to your medical strategy, which ultimately ladders up to the brand strategy. So I think building up that integrated SciComm strategy is the first step before you go into the deliverable, but also that strategy. I really want to bring up in discussion here the strategy for SciComm now and the audience for the scientific communication team and the target audience. We're no longer just focusing on HCPs. We are focusing on patients. How are we targeting patient as our audience with building up the strategy for reaching out the patient is also part of our integrated SciComm strategy before we go to tactical, because you need to build that in a strategy in order to deliver on that tactical. So I think the biggest right now is how to build that integrated SciComm strategy and integrate together. And as I said, it's doable. It's not like it's not. It's really doable with the right mindset, building that trust with the cross-functional team, and defining the core mission and the core deliverable as well. And the deliverable, when I say the core deliverable, because you also need to set the expectation. You could have the strategy, but you want to make sure you set the expectation that sometimes it's impossible to do everything with the limited structure or limited resources.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand. So you've mentioned building trust before, and that makes me think about leadership and how to affect organizational change in the transition of this, which I imagine can be quite a challenge for a lot of people that maybe have been in the role for a long time and kind of suddenly need to change how they interact with others in terms of collaborate with others is a better word. So what have you done in this transition to kind of support your teams to adopt this new way of working?
Yeah, I mean, we're very grateful. We have the leadership are supportive of that new structure. And also we have the Luxor region supportive as well. And for us to get to that level, we had to have that open communication. We really needed to understand from them what is the need, what is the gap, and how we were. And I want to also say something here, Wesley, just for clarification. Before the new model here in my company put together, when they were separate publication and MedCom, we had MedCom leads specific for the U.S. region. So the U.S. team expected some deliverable or certain aspects of things to be done the way they wanted. But when that model put together, we no longer had US-specific MedCom leads. We were just brought together as a global SciComm. So our role as a global SciComm is to support all Luxor region and not be specific to the US. So you could understand already, how do you bring the trust to our US colleagues, and how do you build that trust that we will continue to deliver on what their expectation, however, we have expectation on what we could deliver. So having that two ways conversation and understanding what we could do and what they need to do, I think it's very, very important to make sure you set that expectation, because to them, they had a bigger change as well. They had specific MCL lead or medical communication leads supporting them to do what they needed, but now they don't. So they losing the resources. So it makes it harder for them compared to other Luxor region. So having one-on-one with them, understanding the need, the important key deliverable to require, and building that relationship again and trust that we will support you, but these are what we could support you with as a core deliverable. And then your team could adapt and use them moving forward. So I think it's not just a straightforward. There is a little bit of complexity depending on the original model that was in place before.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I would like to pivot a little bit. So this is super interesting, and I think a lot of people will benefit from the path you have been paving in changing the organization and hopefully get some inspiration out of that. Now, another important part that is ongoing in MedComms right now is, of course, the change in how people consume information in general, and this would include healthcare professionals. So you have a lot of experience in this particular field. So I was wondering, what have you seen since you started in MedComms and medical affairs and now? Like, what would you say are the biggest differences between content consumption by healthcare professionals?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing, and I think the pandemic had something to do with it, is the digital aspects and that visualization of the data and also making the data short and concise. I think that HCP don't have time to read pages and pages or even poster with every single details. I think being more short and precise and visual, like infographics, for example. And we started developing infographics, not just also infographics for HCP, but infographics on the poster, linking a QR codes for a lay summary infographics in a really lay way so that HCP could download or share with the patients and engage them in that way. So I think the visual is picking up more, even for manuscripts. Now, when we submit a publication, a manuscript, we ask if we could do a visual abstract. And I mean, sometimes the journal offer those visual summary of videos, but sometimes we take the lead and say, okay, we want to develop them, because I think most HCP, they probably don't have the time to read the full article. How do we provide that high level 5 minutes understanding what the data, what the impact of the data, and how we could support them to learn how to they support the patient. And also what I'm seeing more, which we started to adapt at Takeda Oncology right now, is developing patient-lay standalone manuscripts and having patients as authors on these manuscripts. The primary data was published, and now how can we translate that primary data and the patient-lay summary to facilitate the patient understanding? And we started doing that, and we had engagement with 2 patients in the presence of the KOL or PI of the study. I mean, it was mind-blowing how excited they were, how engaging they were. I mean, this is what I think we need to keep in mind. Just because they're patient doesn't mean they don't understand. They do, and they experience the disease, but they're very, very engaged. I was so mind-blown by the engagement when we jumped on the call, had a kickoff call with the manuscript. I'm seeing that more and more now, that having the patient authors, in addition to them working with the PIs on the original study to help them understand certain things. So that's where I see it. I see it is going visual and involving patients, but also fast data dissemination. We used to wait until the data is available, and we wait for key congresses to go submit the data and publish. We don't have to do that anymore. We have other, and I'm not sure how many people are familiar with it, but for example, ASCO virtual plenary session that happens on a monthly basis. Now you don't have to wait until the ASCO annual Congress to submit your key data. And we applied that on one of our phase 3 primary data that released. We didn't want to wait. We submitted an abstract and got accepted and got presented. So the speed to data dissemination, I think it's also very, very important, and it's changing the field, how we communicate and how we disseminate data. And I think it's going to continue. Maybe COVID facilitated that speed to data dissemination, but I don't think it's going away. I think it's going to continue to stay moving forward.
Yeah, I've observed the same. It was quite a change, especially from the agency side, because you observe like multiple clients with different needs, and it's often easy to see a pattern across different clients. So I would agree on that. And I also think it will keep accelerating. And I was kind of thinking about something you said earlier in this conversation about having this integrated approach helps your speed and momentum. And you would need that if you don't want to wait for the next conference too, right? So we need to be faster and have more opportunity to actually disseminate data. We need teams that are able to do so.
It's not easy to change the mindset of the team that, oh, we're going to do this virtual plenary session. They're not used to it. So when we first rolled it out, it took a lot of time and effort to make sure we educate even our internal cross-functional team on the benefits, on the impact that will have. And I think we should keep that in mind before you make decision to move forward with that approach. It really, you need to educate your team and change their mindset that this is available, but not just because it's available, there's benefits and there's impact that comes out of it. So I think we need to keep in mind that changing the mindset, that, as I was saying earlier, that mindset is very important in any organizations. If you're going to bring in a new innovation, new ways of doing things or disseminating data, you do need to have that conversation first and change that mindset of your internal team before you move forward. And sometimes that's the hardest thing, to be honest, because once they change their mind and they accept that new ways of doing the innovation, then you take it and roll it and you make it happen. It's important to keep that in mind during that process of developing your integrated strategy, because you need to make sure it's reflected the timeline and everything from the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you just said is actually very important as well. Like, there's a lot of training in medical affairs, and most of it is focused on the science and the product. And that is, of course, very important. However, our jobs are evolving around communicating to the outside world. And how can we train people better on communicating? And as an agency founder, of course, I believe in the principle that you can't really effectively communicate to an audience you don't know inside out, right? So recently, one of our clients had this idea, that the same idea, where they said, like, we want to make sure that our team actually fully understands, particularly for an HCP audience, like where they currently stand, what are the needs, what has changed, what are the most modern and innovative communication channels and formats that we could use. And they asked us to help them organizing a training. So we had like a MedComms masterclass, and it was really exciting. It was kind of a first time for us too. We normally don't really do that, but we have a lot of the expertise and we love to share our expertise as MedComms experts here. And it was very successful. So we went over like different data, like what kind of channels are appreciated most by HCPs and how does pharma look at that. And there is a lot of discrepancies between there, where certain channels are completely underutilized and the HCPs are actually looking for information in those channels. And also like the use of formats is a big topic. Like, what kind of formats can you use and when do you use them and when does it make sense and when does it not make sense? And if you then apply an omni-channel strategy as well, it becomes even more complex. You need to also start thinking, how can you do that within the budget constraints that you have? So what you just said was really important, because you basically touched up on that and said, like, we need to kind of understand this information if we want to evolve as a team and communicate better. And the ESCO virtual symposium is a good example of that as well.
Yeah. As a medical affairs professional, this is the time and opportunity for us to think outside the box. But obviously, we need to think outside the box with our compliance team as well. And I've seen recently, yes, before, years ago, compliance were very strict, very rigid, medical affairs, we can't do this, we can't do that, we can't. But now they're coming out as well, thinking we need to challenge the status quo. We need to do this. We are still compliant. We could do it. We do it in a compliant way, and this is the way to do it. Let's think more about it and how we as medical affairs professionals could really break the ceiling, but keep it in a compliant way. It doesn't work all the time. We'll get pushed back. But I think if we don't take that next step and move forward with this new generation or new technology, or even the need for HCPs and changing, we're not going to get there. We'll probably be behind. So I definitely, that's why I'm so excited about this. Like, let's push the boundaries forward and obviously do it compliantly. But if we don't try, if we don't ask, and if we don't challenge certain things, we will be stale where we are and we can move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to be trailblazers. I think compared with other industries, our communication tactics and strategies are quite behind, actually. And I'm excited about all the change that is happening and for it to move forward further. So now we're coming to the end of our recording, Caroline. I have a few more questions for you. So how do you think the world of MedComms will look like in 10 years from now?
from my perspective, I think I'm going to call it a SciComm rule. Not just MedComm. I think we're going to continue to evolve. We're going to continue to evaluate how we're going to bring AI into what we do. I know everybody's talking about AI right now and how we bring it into our day-to-day. I don't think we're there yet. I really don't think we're there yet with AI in medical or scientific communication. But I see that in the future, that's going to be the norm. So I would expect the SciComm or the MedComm professional to be expert in digital. And I think we need to start now building that digital capabilities and competencies of our medical communications professionals. I think this is the time. And, in medical communications, I think a lot of the professionals, they also a younger generation. So they love digital. They love this innovation. Let's build the capability because I think that's where it's going to go. I don't think it's here yet, but I think in the next few years, we will start to see some AIs incorporated in our strategy, SciComm strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. Last but not least, if there is one experience or tip or mantra or thought that you could share with all of your colleagues listening to this podcast around MedComms, what would it be?
Yeah, I hope you share my passion for MedComm and publications or the scientific communication in general, because I think for me, the field is so dynamic and let's together embrace the changes that's coming, how we disseminate data, how we work with HCP. Let's come together and build that community of change and challenge the status quo, because just because things were done before that certain way, it doesn't mean they need to stay. And I think we have an opportunity to reshape it together. So connect with me. I would love to connect and build that trust and build that new community where we challenge the status quo.
Excellent. Yeah, and that's good that you say that so people can maybe find you on LinkedIn and connect there.
Sure, definitely. I will welcome any connection. As I say, we're in it together. And I'm sure we understand some of the challenges. It's not always as straightforward. It might sound easy, but I think we all understand there's more challenges that we deal with on a daily basis. But I think we are good at managing those challenges. Now let's take up that next challenge.
Yeah, I really like that. Thank you so much, Caroline. It was a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Wesley. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Transforming Medical Communications is brought to you by MedComms Experts. To find out more about MedComms Experts and how we create some of the most cutting-edge medical communications programs anywhere in the world, visit www.medcoms-experts.com. And then make sure to search for Transforming Medical Communications in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at MedComms Experts, thanks for listening.